The professional ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and do not reflect those of any current or past employers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Make It So podcast. I'll be your host for this podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Groves, and today I'm delighted to have with me Paul Battle, co-founder of a company called Medome. And what's fascinating about this almost feels like a new category in healthcare, and it is AI enabled, if you will, as most things are in healthcare these days. But Paul is a co-founder, and so I'll ask Paul, if you would, please just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, Robert, thank you again. Great to see you. Great to be on a podcast with you again. I think it's been a couple of years since we did this, and a little bit's changed on my side. So I am a 25-year technology exec. I was with IBM and then Lenovo, rose through the ranks. And unfortunately, in my personal life, I lost my late wife to breast cancer. And during that journey, she had a misdiagnosis. And that led me really to focusing back on healthcare. I have a healthcare background. I have a biochem degree, did cancer research for a couple of years, was heading into medical school, chose computer engineering and IBM instead. But now I'm back to it with a mission. And I was, quite frankly, looking into the ether and as to kind of what to do in the healthcare space from an AI perspective. And ultimately, Soap Health and then now Medome really came to the forefront as a focus really on misdiagnosis, and saving lives was my mission and kind of really in my purpose.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Paul. Your co-founding partner is an MD, correct?
Yeah,
Stephen
so
Charlap, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, so we co-founded it. So Dr. Stephen Charlap. So he founded Soap Health originally, and he is an MD, and he's also got an MBA from Harvard, and he's a serial entrepreneur. He's been successful. Quite frankly, he was retired, and he similarly has a mission. He lost his brother, a trained cardiologist, to a misdiagnosis,
Mhm.
and his wife actually lost a friend to a misdiagnosis, and all of a sudden he saw himself back creating a company, Soap Health, and we then came together and co-founded Medome, and we soft launched it in second week of November, and it's going strong thus far. But needless to say, yes, he's a trained physician for 40 years.
Wow. Okay. So let's get down to brass tacks here. What
Yeah.
is Medome? What makes it different? Give us the overview.
Yeah, it's a lot of things, in it's pretty clear. First of all, the focus area is to eradicate misdiagnosis. That is the focus. While at the same time, it becomes you as a consumer or a patient, your medical record. So your medical records today are pretty much owned by electronic medical record companies and the hospital systems which they're associated with, whether it's Athena or Cerner or which is now Oracle, or it's
Right.
Epic, which is a big one, or it's one of the big hospital systems. I live in New York City, so you might be part of Mount Sinai or Weill Cornell or someone like that. It's owned by them, right? This ultimately gives you the opportunity to own your health record. And that's important when you go from hospital to hospital, and the record is again yours, but also it's it's factual. So we're finding that there's a high number of data incorrect that in the medical records, about 40%. Most people look at their medical records and there's about 40% information is actually incorrect. So it's
Hmm.
that. So it's a centralized medical record. You can upload scans, you can upload genetic testing, lab tests, anything, you name it, it can be uploaded into this model, and it continues to reevaluate. And here's the beautiful part, and this is how it really works. The output every time ultimately is centered around a summary of the health record, any sorts of diagnosis, so a top 10 diagnosis, right? And it's kind of a red, yellow, green system, and any sorts of actions you need to confirm or kind of, quite frankly, deny them. And then there's also a risk assessment. So based upon 3 generations of family history, maybe you have nothing today that points to the fact that you have some sort of cancer or heart disease or something else. But the ultimate kind of everything together, including your family history, and some other kind of minor, what you believe are minor symptoms adds up to something that could be a predictor. And then discrepancies in health. So let's think about some discrepancies that could be in your health record. For example, you're taking an opioid, but there's no reason for it in your past medical history. So
Mm.
that obviously would be a pretty big red flag. The antithesis would be you've been diagnosed with a thyroid issue, but you're not taking anything for it. There's no medication, there's nothing. So what's wrong there? Were you misdiagnosed, or did you not put down the medication? All of that information would come to light and would come to the forefront. So discrepancies in health are also really important to diagnose properly as well. So that's kind of all started out as. Now we're adding in a health and wellness aspect of it. So how does wearable data that all of us look, I wear a Fitbit, so I'm not an advertiser for it, anybody, but people wear Fitbits and Apple Watches and Garmin's and Samsung watches and Oura Rings and all this like kind of huge breakthrough of how does that information ultimately tie back in? And are there indicators? Is there anything we can get there? Because I've asked people like, why do you wear an Oura Ring? And some people are like, oh, well, I really want to know like, if something I'm doing is really going to affect me.
So
like,
wait a minute. Let
yeah,
me stop you for just a second, Paul.
yeah.
So if I wanted Medome to absorb that information,
It
that
can.
continuous stream from Fitbit, it can ingest that information and use
Correct.
it appropriately?
Correct. One directional. So to be clear, right now it's one directional. So we absorb the information and it runs it back into the model and again can continue to reassess. So now like heart rate, and things of that nature are really important. You can kind of monitor and see if there's anything that's out of the ordinary. Now, if you're clearly working out and your heart rate goes up, normally that obviously makes sense. But there's some times where you might be kind of shortness of breath and you're doing a normal, it can flag that. We can notice those patterns based upon the information. So we're not just initially pulling in the information starting on that day. We'll try and go back into the history, kind of that you've collected, right, with that wearable that you have. But my point about the Oura Ring was going to be somebody kind of made a comment to me and said, oh, like when I'm at a steak restaurant, I have steak and a glass of red wine, my numbers go up. And I'm like, well, that's groundbreaking. It's like, it's telling you not to eat red meat and it's telling you not to drink alcohol. Like, really, that's not groundbreaking. But the reason why I laugh at that a little bit is, look, I suffer from gout, right? So red meat is worse for me than it is from the average person, right? And
Right.
alcohol tends to actually be worse because, again, those could be triggers for gout for me or a gout attack, which is incredibly painful. I hope nobody ever gets one. But that's kind of my point, is that is not necessarily personalized, right? So the Oura Ring doesn't tell me that, by the way, Paul, you definitely shouldn't be eating red meat because that could be a trigger for gout. That's the delineation. It's very generic, just based upon your demographics and basic information. But there's way more to your personal record and how things affect you.
So the other question that immediately pops into my mind, because I am pre-diabetic,
Yep.
and so I have periodically used ketogenic diet, and so my question is it a dogmatic service? Is it going to tell me, oh my gosh, you can't do that, you should be Mediterranean only? Or is it personalized to seriously, is it personalized to the point
it's a good question. Yeah,
it appreciates nuance?
So at the moment, it's ultimately going to give you the best possible advice that it can give you from a nutritional perspective, et cetera. So if you are pre-diabetic, it's going to give you nutritional information. There's also generic kind of blog type information. So if you don't want to get it directly and receive it directly, that's kind of something that can happen. You can read through the blogs, like, why is orange juice really good for you and really bad for you at the same time? Well, because it's high in sugar, right? But at the same time, there's vitamin C. So it would specify it to you. Now, we actually have a quick little survey you can take that's like a precursor to the overall solution, which is called Health Signs. And this is really critical on how you want to receive information, because we're not all the same in how we receive information, specifically medical information. And then on top of that, what motivates us, or quite frankly, sometimes demotivates us. So those are actually important as well. Is like, what's my health sign? I mean, you probably can gather by the way I speak. I like to get it direct. I like direct
Yep.
information. Others maybe not are the same. Others like it a little bit softer and a little bit drip, like kind of fed versus that. So for you in particular, again, you would have two sources. You would have these generic sources on nutrition and pre-diabetic, and then it would be something specific to say nutritionally. Here's kind of how you could, benefit yourself. Now, in the future, of course, we'll get into the wearables around kind of numbers and so on and kind of taking insulin. We're not there yet, but that certainly is the future that we would plan to get
Okay.
to.
Okay. So let me ask another question, Paul, because this is fascinating.
Sure.
And this is a two-part question. So I'll just ask one part at a time to keep us
That's
both
okay.
from being confused. And the first question is, how does this information get into Medome?
Yeah, so the wearable information, and in addition, there's others out there. Besides wearables, there's also MyFitnessPal, there's LifeSum, there's health and wellness apps, by the way, also come through. So on the Apple side, it comes through Apple Health. If you're familiar, Apple Health is like a central
Yeah,
repository, collects all
sure.
that information. And so we have an integration that works directly kind of with
You
Apple
do.
Health. And
Okay.
similarly, we have integration on the Android side, and it's a little bit more open on the Android side where you can actually connect directly to wearables, not just the Google kind of Android Health. But on the Apple side, it's Apple Health, essentially, is kind of how it works. And it pulls it in. As a reminder, again, it's one directional, right? So it's important.
Right.
So it's not going to spit out any like benefits to your Fitbit or your Apple Watch or something like that. It's not going to tell you through
Right.
there. It's going to continue to tell you through Medome, through the solution.
Okay. Okay. And is Medome an app or is it a website
Web,
or how
web.
do I access the information on Medome?
Medome is web driven, and there's a reason. So, of course, we can make it into a web-based app. That's something we could have done, but there is a tremendous amount of AI that's used in it, and there's a back and forth. So ultimately, the web app is cloud-based. It sits in the cloud, and that allows for a much speedier response time with the avatar on the interview up front, which you'll do as a patient. You'll do a 30 to 45-minute upfront interview, really kind of going deep into your family history, into your social determinants of health and other pieces. It allows it to be much smoother versus an application itself. It would be huge. It'd be massive. And then we're continually updating. As you can imagine, data in healthcare changes all the time. Actually, every 83 days, medical information doubles, right? That doesn't mean it's all good information, by the way, but that's
Right.
about the doubling effect of medical information. And so, therefore, for us to make sure we encompass all of that information into the application, into the model itself, in that it has to be web-based and it has to be cloud-based. So that's what we have done it. And so it's Medome.ai is ultimately where we use. In addition, we're using proprietary databases and algorithms, which again, we have in the cloud. And some of these databases are integral. For example, there are certain symptoms that are what's called atypical presentation of disease, right? So they don't typically point to something and you might not know it. Most doctors actually miss it. We actually have a database dedicated to this exact fact. A second one is biases around demographics. The most misdiagnosed group in the United States, for example, are obese Black women. They walk into a primary care physician and they are immediately biased and immediately misdiagnosed. And so we actually have a database that eliminates that and gives these individuals a chance to advocate for themselves to a primary care and say, actually, it might be this. Could we check this?
So that sounds fantastic. Let me ask some practical questions. Who's your customer? Is it individual consumers? Is it
Yes.
businesses? Is it,
Yeah.
are you going to sell to State Farm or how does this work?
Yeah. So first of all, customers are everyone, right? Anyone, from a consumer perspective are our customers.
So
From
you
a
do direct to consumer.
we launched like we'll call it a soft launch. Second week of November, we soft launched to consumers. So Medome.ai, you have a free trial, and then you can go straight into the application, right, and get a subscription. And it's a subscription model, right? So there's a monthly, which is $14.50 a month. If you do a yearly all at once, it's $120 for the year, which translates into $10 a month, which really isn't expensive if you think about it. But ultimately, our primary was to go and advocate on behalf of the consumers, so those patients and those people could bring that information to a physician and so on. Or you can connect to one of our telehealth physicians as well. We do have that option for you to connect to a telehealth physician as well. And I'm sure over time we'll build out a network, specialty, for example, like if something points to you might have chronic heart disease, okay, we can put you in touch with a cardiologist, and to do actual physical tests. So that's one of them. The second route to market that we've started going into, and we actually have someone in pilot phase, is around self-insured companies. So we're going after smaller ones right now, kind of 500 to 1,000 employee type companies. But these sorts of companies are obviously, from a corporate perspective, are worried about high cost claimants, worried about those people that could be $1 million plus cost for whatever reason. So they're worried about that. They're also worried about absenteeism, right? So people being out of the office for short amounts of time, but obviously more importantly, longer periods of time. And on the employee side, the benefit to them is it's predictive and proactive versus reactive. So as opposed to somebody being out for 6 months because something happened to them, they had a chronic disease, a heart attack, or something kind of worse. In this particular case, we can typically catch it up front and get in front of it and give them recommendations to avoid that. And then, of course, now they're more productive as well as an employee, kind of a win-win situation between the employee and the employer. So there's benefits to self-insured companies as well. So those are kind of our two routes to market at the same time. And of course, we're building partnerships. We're working to build partnerships with wearable companies, but we've already built a partnership, for example, with Quest Diagnostics to have testing done, recommendations of tests being done through it. We're building one with LabCorp and countless other genetic testing companies and other sorts of companies in this space. So that's kind of a little bit about a route to market and kind of where we're trying to go with this.
It sounds like it's an evolving picture as we speak. The other question that I have is, some of our audience will be providers. And so how do I interact with Medome? And let's say a patient is using Medome. How do I see that as a provider?
Yeah, good question.
Is it integrated with Epic or Oracle or Athena or any of the EMRs out there?
That is something, so we are working on. So we were originally integrated with Athena, and we're determining at a point when we get to enough subscribers, quite frankly, to go back to Athena or Epic or Cerner. But right now, it's a little bit more manual, unfortunately. So what the person has to do ultimately is get that information. They'll have it on their phone. There's nothing kind of stopping them from bringing it to them on their phone, or they can physically print it out, or they can, of course, email it through the portal directly to them. We're working specifically on a way so that the patient can kind of follow instructions and send the output directly to a physician, right? So that's in the future, it's going to be fully integrated. It's going to be straight there right to the doctor so they can see it and they can have that information as the appointment kind of is set on. But the key here is that you don't need an appointment for this, right? We actually would want you to do it when you're healthy, not when something transactional comes up, like you have a cold or you think you have the flu or something else, right? You want you to kind of do it while you're healthy, because then you can get it in front of it and be predictive and proactive, right? Versus kind of reactive. And the reason we say it this way is because most of healthcare is built about reactive. Like we go to the doctor most people go to the doctor when they need to, when something's wrong, right? Not the other way around. I mean, even fewer and fewer people now are doing wellness visits every year. And so this is what we're telling people is to say, hey, have something work on your behalf 24/7, proactive and predictive, right? And then you can also share all that information directly with the physician using the tool. So
what does that look like?
Yeah.
First of all, let me say that I get that. So this is not an EMR. It's not another EMR.
No.
I mean, it sounds like it could function as one.
It could function as what we would call it would be a personalized EMR. It's your EMR as a patient, not as a hospital system, or an insurance
Gotcha.
company. Nothing.
Okay.
It's a personalized, electronic
So
medical
I own
record.
it, I control it, I
Correct.
determine what goes in it, etc.
Correct. Yeah, and you can download all your information from Epic. Say you're in MyChart and you have a MyChart record as a patient, you can download everything from MyChart that it has and actually upload it into our model and it absorbs it in there. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
nothing.
So I don't need to manually transcribe everything in my chart.
No,
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
did it
Because
on my own. I just did it about kind of a month and a half ago on my own record. I took my entire MyChart history, right, and put it upload. But here's one interesting piece, right? I lived in London for 7 years. Okay, fine. Most people don't live outside of the United States. So, but there is no Epic MyChart in the United Kingdom. They have different
right,
EHRs and EMRs. So I had to go and
right.
get everything from there and bring it in. In the future, I'll never have to do that again. I now
Okay.
have this, what I would consider near perfect personal health record. And the reason that's also important is because we're constantly using AI and our algorithm and our databases to analyze that medical record for me on my behalf. Right. So
Okay.
by the way, I
Okay.
was misdiagnosed. They didn't think I had gout. Like that was not their initial. They said it must be something from because I had it in my wrists versus my legs. Most people get it in their legs. I
Right.
got it in my
Hmm.
wrists. They thought it was something from again, and I was told to see an orthopedic. If they would have asked one additional question, which is, hey, what does your father and your grandfather have? Which, by the way, they both had gout on my father's side. It would have
Yeah.
been pretty obvious that that was the case. So I tested Medome because, that's what you do, right? When you're in science, you kind of test things. So I tested Medome. I didn't put that I was ever diagnosed with gout. It literally came up as the number one thing. Like you
Hmm.
probably have gout, right? And so
Gotcha.
all of
Gotcha.
a sudden, again, this is how it works. But back to the medical record, this is personalized, right? This is highly personalized and it's near perfect.
So each time that I get new information, let's
Yeah.
say I got new labs drawn, or I've got a
Yep.
new visit with a specialist and
Yeah.
so how do I get that? I mean, I would assume that the sooner I update
Yeah.
Medome, the sooner it has to run the algorithms and say, hey, did you think about this or did you think
Correct.
about
Yeah.
that?
So there's a couple good points there. All right. So let's first start with the kind of the seeing a physician. So first and foremost, when you're going to see a physician, the other output that we give you ultimately is 15 questions to ask your physician. Now, if you're not seeing them anytime soon, my
Huh.
my recommendation is very simple, which is exactly what I did when I got my first set of output from Medome. I put it into the portal in my chart and sent it to the doctor. The doctor had a kind of a funny answer initially, and then wrote me all the answers because look, I'm trying to be like pragmatic, but at the same time, we have to be realistic with medical today. It's a business. I know no one wants to hear that, right? But the reality of the situation is medicine and healthcare in this country, absolutely, it's a business. By the way, even in nationalized healthcare systems like the UK, Canada, the Nordics,
Sure.
et cetera, it's still a business. There are
Yeah.
still metrics on how many patients a physician needs to see in a day. There
And
is
there
still an
are
administrator.
taxpayers footing the bill, and they want to make sure that it's an efficient,
Oh,
well-run system. Yeah.
absolutely. So make no bones about it. Your doctor doesn't really have enough time to kind of do that. So what are the right questions, to ask your doctor so they're in front of this and they're actually helping you versus just checking a box like they saw you. And the second piece, which is really important, is we give you an AI scribe and you can record your session with a physician. Now, in 37 states in the United States, so 37 out of 50, you don't have to ask for permission. You can just
Hmm.
go in, record it. The doctor can't stop you. In the other 13 states, you do have to ask for permission, but I'd argue the really simple point. If the doctor's really worried about you recording them, are they the best doctor? Probably not. Most are pretty confident in themselves, right? So they're going to let you do it. And this is not a liability. This, everybody thinks initially, oh, okay, you're trying to catch. No, no, no. That has nothing to do with it. I've been in the room, unfortunately, hearing the worst possible words that can come out of a doctor's mouth. You have, in my case, cancer, right? And when I heard it, and I'm sitting there next to my wife, and it's such a challenging thing to hear.
Yeah.
And the person who's in that situation, at a minimum, usually shuts down and doesn't hear anything else. So now all of a sudden you have this AI scribe that's going to capture all of that information that happens afterwards as to what the physician's telling you is the next steps. What can you do about it? All these sorts of things. And you might miss all of that, which is pretty important information to capture, right? That's kind of a worst case scenario. In other scenarios, the doctor could be telling you things to kind of work on. Maybe they're like, hey, you're 10, 15 pounds overweight. You should work on this. Go do this, this, and this. You're probably not going to remember all that information, but this will. It will summarize it for you. And second, it flows back up again into the model. So if the doctor said something that was different or new from a medical perspective, it will get captured and uploaded into this perfect medical record. It will be analyzed again and it will come out. So there's a couple of things. That's why going to a doctor is kind of part of it. So that's one. And then of course, if you get a lab test on Quest, it's going to be automated, right? And it's going to flow straight in. Others might be a little bit more manual. You have to upload the document as kind of the output, and you put that into the model again. So that's.
But if I get, I can't remember which. I think I've had both Quest and LabCorp at various times, and then specialized cardiology labs like Boston.
Yep.
I can't remember the exact name of the company, but
so
they give me a PDF. Does
upload
that
it.
Really? And so
simple
translate that.
Drag and drop, reads it into the model and so on. And it might even call out a discrepancy. It might even say, hey, that seems like, if you've had multiple lab tests, right? And then all of a sudden one of the liver function or kidney function numbers is like dramatically high. It might be like, that seems a little strange. You might want to get the test again.
Might be an error. Yeah.
Right. There might be a kind of a statistical error there or something.
Most people don't realize that if you get 36 tests done, it is almost guaranteed
to make
that a couple of them will be wrong. It's just the statistical nature of laboratories. And most people
100% correct.
Yeah. So this sounds like the best case that I can make for this is, it sounds to me like this is taking control of my medical information and to an extent taking control of my own healthcare, taking it back. Now, the downside is, it sounds like, at least in the current environment, there's an investment up front. I'm going to spend 30, 45 minutes doing a medical history, and it won't be the last time if healthcare is, I'm not for Medome, but I mean, each and every time I go to a different physician, I'm
Let me
doing
walk
the
through
same
that
thing
one.
over and over again. Okay.
So that's a good question. Okay. So first of all, we're recommending people don't fill it all out in the same session. So you'll spend 30 to 45 minutes, but you don't have to do it in like one sitting. You can do it in 2 to 3 sittings. That's actually the first thing we tell you. Just finish a section and then maybe kind of do the next section the next day or something. That's no problem. The second is, you can use this information. So when you get the output to your physician, it includes all this upfront answers that your doctor can use. Because again, I'm going to be brutally honest, right? I did a physical, I can't remember now, a couple months ago, and I was asked to fill out what ostensibly was a 5 or 6 minute intake, something to that effect. And it was borderline useless for 2 reasons. One, the questions on it were incredibly generic. It's like, how many drinks do you have a week? It was asking me, do you take any drugs that you're not prescribed, right? Are you still taking these prescription drugs? That was about the only relevant one, in my opinion. But needless to say, okay, 1 drink for me a week, right, is fine. 1 drink to an alcoholic is an issue, right?
Right.
So
True.
again, like that's kind of why that sort of question is again erroneous. And then what was worse is I get to my appointment, and I'm not going to name who my physician is because he's actually pretty good. Needless to say, he asked me the same questions.
Yeah, of
And I
course.
literally
Yeah.
said to him point blank, I'm saying, do you not see the intake I did? He's like, no, I never looked at it. I'm like dumbfounded. I'm like, then why am I doing it? Like, why am I spending 5 to 6 minutes? So the next time I've gone in, and I have a rheumatologist, of course. So I went to my rheumatologist and I gave them my Medome output, and they didn't do the intake. And I'm like, I'm not doing the intake. Here's my output. And they're like, oh, this is way more comprehensive. I'm like, exactly. So what we're intending is that what we're doing from a medical record perspective, an intake won't be necessary other than a handful of questions that are more specific to what you're transactionally going on with you right
The
now,
chief complaint. Right.
like chief
Right.
complaint or the
Yeah.
symptoms
Yeah.
that you might be facing. Yeah.
So then, what's been your experience with providers? Because one of the things that
Yeah.
I practiced medicine for a long time, and we
You have,
always
yeah.
had the easy patients and the tough patients. And I never had a problem with the tough patients, but the tough
Okay.
patients come in with notebooks full of information, some
Hmm.
useful, some not, but it tells you a lot about them, and so it was worth going through, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
But that was a little bit of a different time. I mean, the time one has with a physician now is compressed into these 6 to 12 minute intervals. I don't know what the average time is these days, but it's gone way down.
5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's been your experience with the response of providers to all of
Right.
a sudden having all of this information?
So look, we're working with a number of physicians, by the way, because it's critical to make sure, that they're on board with the way in which primary care is going ultimately from this direction. So one in particular in Baltimore, was integral in designing what the output needed to look like. And so his exact complaint to me initially, before we ever gave him anything, was I have so many people, half my patients come in and they've done a search of some description. And he's like, most of them aren't that sophisticated. They're giving me Google searches or WebMD. He's like, but I'm getting it like a hankering of like the LLM, like chat GBTs and so on.
Right,
And
right.
and he's like, I spend almost the entire time discounting what that said because it's incredibly generic and it's not personalized to that individual, right? That, hey, that headache you have is not brain cancer, right? And he's like, he was kind of joking. He's like, but at the same time, he's like, I'm being serious. He's like, it's ridiculous. He's like, I spend all my time now discounting this. And he's like, so I showed him the output, based upon kind of one of his patients. He gave the information. We did it anonymously and gave the information. And all of a sudden, he's like, this is perfect. He's like, wow. He's like, this is highly personalized. And I said, exactly. He's like, no, this will help me. He's like, this absolutely will help me, guide me in the right direction. Right. So that's the difference. Right. So doctors have already kind of gotten like this training, if you will, on receiving something from the patient where they think they're a doctor. Right. So this is very different. This is going to show them that they're not a doctor, right? That they don't know everything because this is much more sophisticated and they can still give relevant information to their doctor that will help them get diagnosed properly and actually seen and heard. That's the difference. So doctors now realize that this is much better than the alternative, which is this generic information. Like I mentioned with wearables, it's the same thing. WebMD and Google are very similar. You put in some symptoms in there, it's going to tell you the worst possible thing in the the likely, and it's not going to know exactly which one's for you. We have the way of predicting much more effectively.
Very good, very good. I read on your website, the web page, that 5+ years has been spent in the development of
Yeah,
this, and you drop
correct.
names like Harvard and Stanford and the NIH. Tell
Yeah,
me about that. What
yeah,
is
that's a good
that about?
question. So, all right. So first of all, this was started officially in 2019 in Soap Health, and Dr. Charlap was a fellow at Stanford for many years studying diagnosis. And so there's the schools of thought, which is their traditional medical way of diagnosis and what we believe ostensibly is going to be the better way, right? So we have a little bit of a different way of diagnosing that's not your typical way, right? And the reason this is important is because traditional methods of diagnosis are leading to like 15% misdiagnosis. And that might not sound crazy in the grand scheme of things, but if you do digest that for a second, that means every human being on earth will face a misdiagnosis in their lifetime, if not more than one. That's the first statistic. The second is in the United States, 400,000 people die and 400,000 people are disabled, unrecoverable a year due to misdiagnosis. And those are the ones we know about. Unfortunately, when you look at the death certificate for my late wife and all the statistics around it, it doesn't even say cancer, breast cancer, by the way. It says kind of essentially pneumonia, right? And then
Right.
breast cancer, but it doesn't say misdiagnosis, right? Same thing with Dr. Charlap's brother. It doesn't say misdiagnosis. So that's what's captured is 400,000 of each, right? So there's probably far more to this, right? So we've changed the methodology in which we diagnose upfront and predict, right? We've ran incredibly challenging cases through the model, including one where an individual had a diagnostic odyssey for almost 2 years, and had flown around and tried doctor to doctor and nobody could get it. He ran it through Medome, spent 35 minutes, give or take, doing the intake, if you will. And next thing you know, it spit it out, and it, with 97% confidence, it said it was kind of this rare disease. And he went back to his doctor in Southern California, and his doctor said, I won't use the swear word the doctor used, but ultimately he admitted he'd missed it, right? And that, this was not something. And here's one final statistic, and Dr. Groves, I'm sure you know better than anybody, which is that in a career, the average amount of diagnoses that a physician sees in primary care is about 500 to 750 different diagnoses, thousands on the higher end, by the way.
Right.
There are 28 to 29,000 different diagnoses. So how can we expect a physician who sees a small percentage of them to get them all right? And the answer is we can't. We can't expect them anymore to do that. It's just not possible. And so that's hence why kind of that information is so critical on the way we diagnose and the way in which we methodically go through it. So Charlap, but Dr. Charlap started that, and he's gone through this model. And Harvard ultimately was HBS. So he's a Harvard Business School graduate, right? He's gone through that side of things as well, and built up a network of individuals into this space, into the AI healthcare and space. So just another final statistic: most healthcare AI is focused on the operational efficiency side, making kind of relieving administration burdens. For example, like that's just one major difference is our AI scribe versus the AI scribes that are out there in the world. Most AI scribes are for the doctor to record the session so that they can have SOAP notes done more effectively. There are tons of papers written that say that it's not really helping them that much. They're having to go back and correct it. So the difference here is, again, ours is for the patient so that they can hear exactly what's taking place in their appointment and how they're supposed to kind of take action after their appointment. So it's, again, a different thought process on what's really going to benefit. So.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it, that it's giving control to the patient over their own health history, medical record.
Right.
One of the things that makes people nervous about AI is that AI can confabulate, or what do they call it? Hallucinate. But it's really a confabulation. The reason I call it that is because the neurologic problem of confabulation often includes defending the error in the face of obvious, you're obviously wrong. Why are you defending yourself? And AI will do that. So what safeguards are in place to protect the veracity of the,
It's
AI?
a very good question. So I was listening, I was actually listening to, if you've not heard, there's a health podcast out there, and I was listening to she's a professor at UCLA, and she just wrote a book, and ultimately, she was talking specifically about AI on the diagnostic, the front end of healthcare, and she alluded to the fact that there's a danger when you kind of start going after the diagnostic side using LLMs because of the misdiagnosis and the possible risk of it being wrong or hallucinating, right? So, um, and so she's right, right? So initially, medicine used AI for imaging, kind of reading MRIs, kind of and CAT scans and things
Right.
of that nature, versus using an LLM to do a full medical kind of workup. This
Right.
is this is different. So okay, so let's get back to the question, like how do you avoid hallucination or make sure you don't have it at all? So let's talk about what hallucination is for a second in this realm. Okay, so and by the way, we've had hallucination for a long time, not with AI, but in general studies. So up until about kind of 40 years ago now, 35, 40 years ago, most studies were done with white males, period. Like they were done with white males, right?
Fair enough.
And one like period, let's start with this. Unbelievably, men and women's health is different. Like that's it. I mean, hormonally, they're incredibly different. There's a
Yeah.
reason why there's misdiagnosis with women because so much of the studies have been done on middle-aged white males and they're appropriated to women of any age. And it's obviously that's hallucination. Assuming that is a hallucination in its own right. So how do you make sure you avoid it? So you program it to say if you don't have direct cases like that feed in from a data perspective that feeds into that demographic, you don't give an answer with certainty. You give levels of certainty based upon that. And so you lower the thresholds from that perspective to make sure that you're not giving information so it doesn't allow it. So we do not allow our model to hallucinate. We've programmed it and we have an incredibly talented AI team that ultimately like make sure that the solution does not hallucinate in that way. For example, that's just one example. But make no bones about it, medicine is inherently hallucinating based upon kind of historical data and fact. Like so, just like that's kind of thing. No one, by the way, lately, until kind of the last 30 years, for example, has done focused like studies on demographics that weren't white males. Now they're starting to do that, right? But
Right,
that
right.
that's the thing. So
The debacle around Ambien comes immediately to mind.
of course,
That discovered that, yeah, in white males they clear it pretty quickly. Women have approximately half the clearance, and so they were suffering a tremendous number of
100%.
excess side effects from the same drug because it had
Yep.
never been studied in women. So that's clearly a problem. And the other
Yeah.
thing that while you were talking, that came up for me is I
Sure.
think about how I use AI. So I will ask AI a question, like, how much is this company raised in their seed funding round or whatever else?
Sure.
And it'll come back with a number. But then if I force it to give me the reference, it's a different story. And so is this the same kind of approach you're taking with the AI? Is it's going to look at peer-reviewed literature rather than at the Health Bros blog, that may be out there. How does that?
Yeah, you
Does
have
that sound
to,
right?
yeah, let's kind of first of all, the databases and algorithms are like are handwritten for better, like for lack of a better word. They're handwritten. Right. So they're in a controlled environment ultimately on what gets fed from that perspective. As far as news is concerned, yes, it's we are indicating reputable news sources, from kind of where published papers are coming from. Right. So no judgment about anybody out there who's doing an incredibly kind of good thing, but if it's not proven clinical and or trial-based data, then we're typically not using anything like that, right? So like that, so but the challenge ultimately in programming is yes, whether to use data or not, but also when a case comes along and there's like a little bit of uncertainty in it, okay, how much uncertainty? To your question about, like what's the source? It's the same kind of question, right? Which is, okay, how certain are you? Like what percentage? Like we've never hit 100%. Let's be clear. At no point
Gotcha.
is it going to say medicine, by the way, there's a reason why they say practice medicine because there's never been perfection in it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the point. And there's never 100% guarantees of anything. So
Right.
fundamentally, this is kind of why we give percentages. So it avoids that kind of guarantee that, everybody thinks they're going to get. And it also avoids hallucinating unnaturally to say, oh, we did a bunch of tests, on a middle-aged white guy, and this is a black woman, and it's the same. No, it's not the same. It's going to be most likely different. So that's why you have to stop it from hallucinating. And we've done that.
Paul, I have learned an awful lot from you. We're probably coming up on time here. I could talk about
Sure.
this all day,
Oh,
but let me ask you two.
obviously.
Yeah,
Same.
obviously, two more questions, and they're near and dear to everyone's heart, and that is
Yeah.
protected health information and
Sure.
cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good questions. Okay, so we are HIPAA compliant. We're SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And ultimately, we have a cybersecurity policy as well, right? So the data is completely secure. It's in the cloud. It sits in an encrypted cloud. So again, it's completely safe from that perspective. We knock on wood. I'll knock on wood anyway, but there's been no issues, not only with us, but with the cloud in general that kind of we're in. And again, it's completely safe. And to the point where anyone who fills out the information, I don't even have access to it. I have no access to anybody's information in our entire solution, and I'm the co-founder, right? So the only person that has any access to the information, besides the patient, of course, is Dr. Charlap, if you want him to, for whatever reason. But ultimately, it's just you that has access to your own information. That's what's kind of key to
Now,
us.
I got to say, I read something crazy, and
Sure.
that is that Dr. Charlap, is he still giving out his cell phone number to
He
folks that sign
does. He does.
up?
So do I. So do I. No, we both give out our cell phone numbers. And to answer the question that might come next is, do we get some interesting calls? Yes, I get some interesting calls and texts and things
Yeah.
that come to me. But yeah, both of us. He's incredible. He's in his first company, he gave it out, and he said he gave it out to about 6 million people essentially, and so look, he is totally committed. We're both totally committed, quite frankly, to this. But the most important part about this is the mission, which is to save people's lives, right? So that's what we're here to do, is ultimately save people's lives. And we wish it would have been successful going straight to physicians. It wasn't. So now we're giving patients, and ultimately consumers, the way to advocate for themselves and kind of and to
Well,
take the action they need.
that move resonates deeply with me because I used to give out my personal number
Yeah.
to every patient that I saw, and contrary to what you might think, I rarely got unnecessary calls during my time in practice. Anyway, this is a little bit different animal.
Yeah.
And that's why I was a little bit nervous after reading that. It's like, okay,
He's
poor Dr. Charlap. That sounds
he's been good thus no, he knock on wood, he said the calls he's been getting have been genuinely, he's been helping people. So
well.
that's
His
really what he wants.
commitment is clear. That much is clear. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you're still fairly early on in the
Yeah.
evolution of
Correct.
this project. You've made one pivot and said, okay,
Hmm.
if we can't go the direct route, how about let's give consumers control of their, which, by the way, I'm a huge advocate for. I think we
Good.
ought
Thank
to
you.
own our own medical records. We ought
Totally
to
agree.
own the data that's in those records. So I'm a big advocate for that. So, but
Yeah.
what's the vision for the company? Where are you going? And this is going to be my last
Yeah.
question. So I'll let you pontificate a little bit on
Pontificate.
that. Yeah.
Um, so look, I mean, the vision, quite frankly, is that, everyone in the future owns their own medical record with Medome, and it becomes standard. And we no longer have this disjointed system, that hospital systems and insurance companies, quite frankly, think they own your data and they own you from a kind of a patient perspective, which is kind of at this point how it is. And that we're starting to truly like, as opposed to react, but we're proactively predicting what someone could face and getting in front of it to make people live healthier, longer lives. And that's really what we're going for. So where do I see the actual company going is, from a financial perspective, we expect to get to between 10 and 15,000 users, actual users by the end of the year, and continue to get exponential growth from there. That's on the consumer side. And then up to about 100 self-insured companies by the end of the year, kind of targeted. So you can kind of do the math on what that's going to look like. And we're actually in the midst of doing a raise. So we are raising for the company. And it's a good valuation. I won't go into the details, but again, if interest, certainly something we're looking to do because we know we can absolutely grow beyond where we are today, and it will become the standard. We want to make this the standard. And then one final plug, I will plug it. We do have a special spokesperson for us that's going to be coming on board. I'm not going to tell you exactly who it is, a little bit of a teaser. Maybe it's an invite back, way to get myself invited back. So we're going to have an incredibly, powerful individual who happens to be a germaphobe and a hypochondriac themselves. So this obviously also fits into their profile as to kind of they'll want to see it. And they are
I can't wait to hear
they are a celebrity. And interestingly enough, they're a celebrity that probably like most demographics know. So it's not like kind of our age group, Robert knows it, or kind of the younger age group knows it. I'd say everybody knows it, and they're on a very kind of popular TV show, not only here in the United States, but it's kind of around the world. So that's going to be coming probably in the next couple months. We're going to be launching that campaign with that individual. And needless to say, we're super excited about that to kind of get more kind of exponential growth with this. So
all right,
you're going to see a lot of stuff from us over the next, kind of 2 to 3 months.
Final thing, if we have listeners that are interested in investing or interested in learning more or signing up, what's the best way to get information on Medome?
So the website is Medome, Medome. You can see it here, medome.ai. That's the website if you want any information on the solution itself, the free trial, whatsoever. But I will give out both my cell phone and my email. So my email is easy. It's Paul Battle, all one word, PaulBattle @medome.ai. And my cell phone is 646-334-9165. So call me if you're interested in any of it, whether it's the solution itself, investing in it, partnering with us. Just want to tell me a story, that's fine too. I'm here to listen.
As usual, Paul, it has been an incredible pleasure talking to you again. And you're right, we need to catch up on other stuff, but
we do indeed.
That's going to be it. And I hope that you and Dr. Charlap can indeed make it so. So that's all from us, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you again, Robert. Great to see you.